Hello folks, welcome to my YouTube channel, Watercolor Impressions. Toronto has been hit with a couple of snowstorms last week, so I thought I would do a snowstorm painting this week. Before you go, hit the subscribe button so you guys can get weekly video updates from our channel. And let's get started, guys. As far as drawing, I'll focus on the big shapes, the secondary shapes and tertiary shapes. Regardless, I'll provide the drawing template. Check my description to download it. So let's start with our first wash. For the first wash, there's going to be a lot of cool colors in our sky. So I'm using a lot of Cobalt Blue, Cerulean Blue, and a tinge of little bit of white paint in it. And I also warmed up the wash on the buildings so that the buildings look really weak with a lot of grays in it. So I want some light to peek through from the buildings. As it comes down to the midsection of the background, I want to add a little bit of warmth. So I'm using, if you don't believe, I'm using a little bit of burnt sienna and a little bit of cobalt blue in it to gray up the wash. And I'm also throwing some water at the top so it comes down and creates that gradient. But as it comes all the way to the bottom, I'm going to use a lot of cool colors. And for that, I'm using a little bit of Cobalt Turquoise and a little bit of neutral tint in it. And you can see we created the gradient, and it also gives the illusion of depth in the background. And I also put some colors for the street lights and for the red lights which is sitting on the midground, and as well as for the green light. You can see in the reference when I took this picture, whenever you take a picture in your mobile, it kind of gives a wide shot. And if you paint as it is, it got a little bit looks boring because it also have a lot of spaces in the foreground. So I changed my composition in such a way that making the streetcar and people are the main focus point, and I'm also trying to create a contrast between them. So when you paint, come up with your own vision, pick up your focal point and spend a lot of time on it. So on the left hand side, you can see I warmed up the wash even further at the background buildings. So I'll start with the background building since there's a little bit of wetness in it, so it gives that loose edges for me. And when you paint these buildings in the background, think everything as a single shape. If you think as each individual shapes, you're gonna lost in details and everything else. You can see I'm combining all these buildings into one shape. You can see I started with the background, and I also combined with the midground building as well. And when I paint the background or the midground buildings, I do wet on wet. Before the wash is wet, I throw down the colors. So I focused on the building which is on the right hand side, the warmer building, and I also treated that as a single shape. For the windows, I left some that warmer colors we threw down earlier. So you can see it kind of looks like the light is coming from the building. And I'm also not exact to the buildings which are I create on the reference, but I'm changing a little bit in such a way that there is something that comes in front. You can see I also varied my values in this building because I want this building to come in the front. So I'm jumping onto the foreground building as well, and you can see even in the foreground that foreground building has a lot of complicated shapes. So if you want to show a building as a building, put some windows, and I use the exact same technique. Before it dries out, I put on the windows color, and I also add a darker bit on top of it. So now let's focus on the streetcar. Streetcar is our main focal point, so I'll spend more time on the streetcar than anywhere else in this composition or in this painting. And you can see we quickly blocked out the buildings. So the buildings are these elements which helps us to show a painting. But the elements which shows that it's a focal point, it's a streetcar and the people. As a painter, we are trying to tell a story, and I want to make sure when somebody sees this painting, they want to get the understanding of it's a snowstorm and it's a busy street and it's downtown. So that's what I was trying to convey. And I realized that I placed the streetcar a little bit low on the ground. I'll fairly admit that. I should have pushed the streetcar a little bit on the top and pushed it a little bit further. And because it's coming too forward. And for the windows, I'm using neutral tint, and I also use a little bit of blue in it. And you can see as soon as we it looks severe now, but as it dries out, as the watercolor does, it does dry out pretty pale, so we have to glaze over a wash again. And now I jumped onto the building, jumped onto the figures. So the person who is in the foreground carrying a bag is our major figure. Rest of the figures are our supporting figures. So think about the main figure, she is walking with the bag. That also gives a little bit of realism in our painting as well. I want to make sure that she reads pretty good than the rest of the figures. It's kind of like she's the heroine of the scene and the rest are the people who are the supporting actors. So you can see as soon as we add the figures, like the whole composition came alive. So now we have like a little bit of small things we have to add in our painting, and we can call this done. So these are the things. You can see there's a white space from the midground to the foreground, and we have to add details in such a way that it enhances perspective, it enhances depth. And when you do this, make sure that you don't overwork the midground or the foreground. It's really important because I carried away when I started painting, but I tried to keep it really minimal, and so that it gives the essence of what we see in the reference. And you can see for the snow, I just left the white paper as it is. And so the roads in Toronto, they have two colors. They're warmer colors, they're darker colors. And you can see for the warmer tones, I left it as it is. For the darker tones, I had a little bit of burnt amber and a little bit of amber in it. So whenever you add these lights, and it literally shows that it's Toronto, because Toronto has this traffic lights of yellowish warmer colors. And they also in downtown, they have this big LED red lights on the top, so I also added that as well. And you can see in the foreground building, this is what I was saying. I want to create an impact of painting where I can show a little bit of contrast. If I would have painted as it is on the reference, the big building, it would have not red as much as in the foreground. And you can see I created a shop with the red and warmer colors, so it kind of pops in the foreground, in the midground. So this bit, and I can do this all day. What I mean by is adding white paint. Whenever you add white paint, make sure to add it minimal. So this is just to pop up some of the highlights you missed while you paint. And it also helps to bring things forward and the backward in the foreground and the midground and the background. And the lights, I want them to glow. So the easiest way to do is using white paint. And I also making sure not to overwork this. I want to make sure that to keep it simple and impressionistic as possible. When this painting is seen from far, it will give the illusion of depth, distance, and light in our scene. It is also necessary when you paint, you have to express everything in a quick, confident way. As in watercolors, it dries really fast, so you have to paint in such a hurry, and you also have to show your strokes in a really confident way. So we are at the end of our painting. Now it's your turn. Take my drawing template and reference, and let's see what you can come up with. I always use white tape to see how my painting gonna look like at the end once it's framed, and I think it came out really nice.